Thank you all. I'm going to take it from here. Thank you guys so much for coming. I wrote all of my notes in my phone so I could read them. I cannot read my own handwriting. We did this a few nights ago in DC.
We had our first trial run across the country.
It went well. I cried. I'm going to try not to do that again. Okay, well, thank you for having me. My first question is, how many people passed before you landed on me for this?
You were further down on the list.
That makes sense. Okay, please explain to those in attendance the nature of our relationship.
I don't know. There's some people here that know you pretty well, so.
But our relationship, how would you describe that?
I guess I would say it's playful.
I mean, you could just say, I'm your husband.
You work. Okay. I like to consider you an employee sometimes.
That's right. Okay, so now, very important, this should have been in the introduction. I wrote the foreword to this book. It's 3 pages, pretty good. And I'm going to read a portion of it now. I offered to write the foreword because Tess was venting a lot about this particular assignment from her editor. While she loves introductions in life, she's not a fan of them in books. She just wants to jump in and get to the heart of the matter, something about a preview taking up too much real estate. As Tess continued her rant about this for several days, I finally had heard enough, insisting, please allow me to do this for you. This is kind of how our relationship works. Tess won't ask for help, but will loudly debate something, sometimes up to a week or more. And as a result, I write a foreword. Truthfully, did you rewrite the foreword after I wrote the foreword?
I had a few notes.
She had a few notes. She addressed them herself. And this is
it was so much faster that way, though.
This is the rewritten foreword of my original foreword, which is much better than the original foreword written by me.
All the ideas are there.
Your
ideas are there.
I just wanted to give you all a picture of what you're dealing with and the true nature of our relationship. The other night at Tess's book party in New York.
Well, this is off script. What's going on?
Tess, as the hosts of the party were giving a toast to Tess, Tess took over the toast and somehow gave a toast to herself.
This is not true.
This is totally true. You got up and took the microphone.
I did.
Just so this
as
is
a
all
measure of gratitude.
Okay. We shall move on. All right. Congratulations, Tess.
Thank you.
Tess's book has come out this week. It's very exciting. She's been working on this book for a very long time. And I guess my first question is, how does it feel to finally have the thing that you have been working on for such a long time be out there in the world and be able to have conversations about it with people who have read it, in particular, Gail King? How has that experience been?
It's been a little surreal and really exciting, both, and a little scary and nerve-wracking. Just a combination of many, many things. But overall, I slept through the night last night, which is very good.
And rare. Well, so last time we did this, we were in DC, which was a couple nights ago. I took an approach with it. It went really well. Again, I cried. I'm going to try not to do that again this evening, but I wanted to mix it up because it's boring and I didn't want to ask you the same questions. So I'm taking a slightly different approach. Also, I thought I took a little bit of an approach that went in the wrong direction last time. So I'm going to try to go in a different direction apropos of the title of this book and see how we do. Okay. So last time we discussed how this book is framed by 3 circumstances: the loss of your job, the impending loss of your father, and experiencing those things during a worldwide pandemic. Now, tonight, I would like to focus on the essays that exist around but primarily after the loss of your job. But first, I just want to begin with the very beginning of the book. It's my favorite part. I'm going to read this. This is how the book begins. Oh my God, I love your shoes. You know, this dress would look so great with those. That was my opening line when I worked as a salesperson at the clothing store BCBG, otherwise known as Bon Chic Bonjour, which in French translates to good style, good attitude. I think this sums up Tess pretty well, but my question really is, and I won't have you read anything else from the book, and I don't know that you need to read from the book actually, but will you please give us your line delivery of, oh my God, I love those shoes. You know, this dress would look so great with those.
Sure.
I'll be the
Okay,
customer.
you be the customer. Okay, walk in.
Okay.
Oh my God, I love your shoes. You know, it would look great with those.
I felt like you were a little nervous. I'm going to give you another run at it.
I'm not the actor here.
I know, but you did it better in DC, I will say. You were more free. I would have bought the shoes. This time, not so much. Okay. Okay, there was actually one more piece I wanted to read real quick. This is the end of before we get to the meaty stuff. This is the end of chapter 2. Chapter 2 really dives into our relationship, how we met. And towards the end of the chapter, well, at the very end of the chapter, you write, today our lives are more complicated and busier, but that initial spark remains. Max, at his core, is the same person I met. Not as hot. There's more, but I just explain.
That was a long time ago, you know? Things have changed. A little bit.
Is there, in the sequel to the book, is there maybe some sort of like, oh my God, there was like an addendum, like, is there?
No, it still stands.
All right, moving on. Okay. Sorry, my notes. I'll get there. Okay, so again, there are three portions of this book, and you do such a beautiful job setting up your career and painting a picture of your father in the first half of this book. And the title of this book, we decided to go in a different direction, is based on a phrase that you would often give as a casting director. Would you like to explain that phrase?
Sure. So in order to let an actor down easy when they are not getting a part, we would say, I'm so sorry, we've decided to go in a different direction. It's not about you, it's us. You know, this role is different. And you know, I had said it so casually throughout my career over 20 years. And the real gist of the book is when the tables are turned and that phrase is used on me, and how traumatic that was. And it really gave me, I mean, I already had a lot of empathy for actors, and I considered myself very sensitive in delivering news when people wouldn't get a part. But this sort of took it to a new level of really understanding that even though it's not about you, it does feel like that in the moment. It is about me. It is about something that I didn't do right in order to get that job.
Yeah, and I think what Tess does so beautifully in this book, if you haven't read it, is you get to know her and how much she put into her job, her career, as you know, as from all the way from BCBG all the way up through the WB and eventually landing at Fox and becoming a casting executive, and how much you put into it. There's also so much that sets up your relationship with your father, what a professional he was, the role he played in your life. He was your outlet for being able to speak about your career, and that was a main connection point between you and your father. And you do a beautiful job of talking about, of articulating that relationship and how those two things connected. And we talk so much in DC about those two things, and that's really where I broke down. So I'm going to stay away from that. I wanted to touch, though, just before you sort of end really talking about your career stuff, or where you end chapter 3 in February 2020. This is right before the world shut down. I had a girls' dinner with my two besties, Joyce and Shannon, at our favorite neighborhood restaurant. I raised my glass and gave a toast to the best days of our lives. We are living them now. It was it was literally a month later that the world was shut down. Mm-hmm. And in August, you lost your job. Before we get to that chapter where you do lose your job, mm-hmm. which you described in such detail, and it is everything. It's brutal, it's heartbreaking, it's all of those things. The one chapter that sort of falls into the mix before that place is the Britney Spears chapter. It's called Broken Picker and Why I DM'd Britney Spears. I'm going to read, I'll set it up very quickly. I walked into the kitchen one morning, as I often do, and Tess was looking at me in a way that said, I need to tell you something. And I need to tell you something important, something I did. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, I've DM'd Britney Spears. Britney had been going through a tough time. It was clear to all that she was struggling. And Tess wrote, girl, I have been following you forever. You need a solid girlfriend. A friend who does not want or need anything from you. Someone who has your back with no ulterior motives. I'm a mom and a sister and have a husband and my own full life. There are normal, good people who live in Los Angeles. You don't need to settle. Anyway, I am thinking about you and hoping that you have a bestie who can support you through your divorce. We are rooting for you. If you ever want to hang or need advice, we got you. XO Tess. Did she write you back?
No.
Okay. The rest of that chapter goes on to describe a situation in which Tess sets up a dating profile for her sister, who was, experiencing a time where she was unlucky in love. And Tess sets up this dating profile as her sister and doesn't tell her sister. Proceeds to have an emotional affair with a man that she met on that dating profile as her sister. Told me about it every day. Was one of the weirdest things that's ever happened. That guy then, after months, I'd say 2 months, broke up with Tess, who was really Tess's sister. And it was devastating. She told me about this, and I said, this is wrong. She told our friend, who is an expert on morals, about this, and he was horrified. I'm going to read an excerpt from the book where Tess tells her sister about what happened. I couldn't read her expression. Was she mad? I looked her in her eyes and saw skepticism. A familiar look I often got from Max that says, what did you do now? She clearly needed time and space to process this. She picked up my laptop and retreated to the cafe table on the patio off our room. I glanced outside periodically to try to judge her reaction as she surveyed Nelson's profile. That was the guy who broke it. Yeah. Reading several months worth of our exchanges, holding my breath in suspense as she combed through my history with him. After nearly an hour, Christina, her sister, came back inside. She sat next to me and put her hand on mine. Thank you. Thank you, Tess. No one has ever done anything that thoughtful for me before. I looked at her, flooded with relief, and also, F off, Nelson. His loss. I find that chapter to be, and we haven't discussed this, and you don't discuss this that much in the book, but I find that chapter to be uniquely female. Your relationship with your sister, this sisterhood that you have, this loyalty you have with women and with Britney Spears, someone you don't know. And it's beautifully situated in the book before your firing. And I think about the women that you worked with that are still so close to you in your life. And I wanted to ask you, and I wanted you to talk about what your experience was in the workplace as a woman.
Well, I think it was mostly positive in that I had a sisterhood of colleagues and we all really like stuck together. We had each other's backs. And I think working in entertainment, I think women find each other and hold on tight and rise through the ranks together. And I think, there's nothing better than a workplace family who you bond with and you love, and, you share about your weekends and you spend more time with them than you do sometimes your own family. And I certainly had that at where I was working. And that was definitely informed the gravity of the loss when I left that job, because I really missed my colleagues and this support group that I had spent hours and days and months and years with. And I think that was really, that was part of why I took that loss of job so hard.
So we find ourselves in the middle of the book at the moment where you've lost your job over Zoom. To say that you were blindsided would be an understatement. I was wondering if you could just explain the reference early on. I mean, it's a brutal chapter, but if you could explain the reference early on in you processing the shock of the moment where you bring up The Bachelor.
Well, there's lots of things in the book that have pop culture references. And at the time that this happened, we had just finished a season on The Bachelor because it was the pandemic and we were catching up on
We would have watched it anyway.
Yeah, okay, well. And I was noticing this pattern of there are these women that when they get, they don't get the rose, and it's been after a long night of shooting and they've had too much to drink and they've been up for hours and they're like, you did not get a rose. And then they have a camera waiting for them and it's a testimonial straight to camera. And they're like, how do you feel? And usually I'd like to say it's not their best moment. and I experienced that same, that same emotion of being like, but why? Like when they said, we're not continuing with your contract, we're not renewing your contract. I still can't even talk about it, but
you want me to take over?
No, but then I remember sort of like thinking to myself, oh my God, I sound like
it's almost like you're embarrassed to say it now. It's in the book. You wrote it all in the book. There was a woman on The Bachelor who kept saying, but why? And then Tess and I would say it around the house and like as a joke. And we go, God almighty, it's fine to say it once, but they kept coming back to her. It was like 3-4 times. And when Tess
couldn't get over it.
She
could not get over it.
When Tess was told the news that she was being fired, she stayed on the Zoom, and I was just outside the door. And the first time I heard it, she said, "So this is how it ends." And it was that same tone as the woman in The Bachelor. And I went, "Oh, I recognize this tone. This is not good." And then several moments later, I heard, "So this is how it ends." And I went, "Oh no. And the third time I heard, "So this is how it ends." And at that point, I opened up the door and I ran in the room and I slammed the computer down and I said, "I can't listen to this anymore. You can't be the woman from The Bachelor. It's too much." The end of the chapter reads, after she had been fired, the question then was how to dust myself off and move forward. I wanted a shortcut to minimize the pain and loneliness that hit me. Did I think it would be easy to get over the heartbreak and move on? Yes. Looking back now, I realize how many things had to happen before I could truly move beyond this major life shift. There was life before the axe falling Zoom, and there was life after. Which brings us to a chapter which I really got stuck on in the last reading of this book. It's called Striking the Set, A Painful Favor. There are so many moments in this. Moments I sort of had forgotten that, we lived through. But so much of this was so hard to read. A particular dark movie reel that played out on repeat was the day Max came with me to pack up my office. It felt like I was packing up a huge part of myself, or at least one part that had pulsated with life-affirming vibrancy. We drove down a deserted street in a rickety U-Haul truck, silent tears streaming down my cheeks, with no radio to listen to or words to fit the moment. The atmosphere felt thick with despair. The eerily empty Los Angeles streets, normally so packed with traffic, were like a ghost town. Silence reigned within and without. My only condolence was that everyone was working remotely, so I didn't have to see anyone as I cleaned out my office. Thank you, universe, for that tiny shred of dignity that you gave me. I don't really have a question. That was so hard to read. Months later, despite the loving support and guidance from all quarters, I was stuck with, who am I without my job? I wasn't eating or sleeping. I needed this pain that was still so sharp to dull. Enter Max, my sweet Maxie. Ice. This is how I have him listed in my phone. Max in case of emergency, who helped me trudge through the damage and repair. He is incredibly evolved when it comes to other people's issues. Subtext, I said other people's problems. Even the most insightful people get blinded when they're standing nose to the glass. I wanted to read that because I felt like that was an unnecessary shot. Later on, Max said, holding my gaze, and I'm not reading this because I thought that I actually don't remember saying this, but it's pretty good. But I have a question for it. Max said, holding my gaze, thank him. I suggested at some point that Tess reach out to the person that the man that fired her. Max said, holding my gaze, thank him for the experience you had working with him. The root of your sadness is about the loss of the many wonderful things the role had provided. If you can become grateful, recognizing those gifts and experiences, that is where the real healing will begin. Write about what you loved. What I love about the placement of this chapter is that it's right after this brutal, horrible, painful moment. And to think about forgiveness so soon after. I mean, in any other structural story, the forgiveness would probably be the end of the story. But for you, and where you put it in this book, and having experienced it with you, it was the only thing that we could try and tackle and try, because until we moved through it, it didn't feel like we could do anything else.
Right.
Does that make sense to you now?
Well, I do think in getting over anything, when you feel betrayed, the way to your own healing is through forgiveness. And it's something that people kind of throw around, but really it's setting you free, and as you set that person free, that you feel is accountable for that. And I certainly at that point was willing to do anything to feel better, because I felt so sad inside and betrayed. And so when Max suggested that, I was skeptical, but I would do anything. I was willing to do anything to try to feel better, and if it meant forgiving the person that I felt betrayed me, then I would try it. I would try it even if I didn't feel it 100%. I was willing to put the words down and hope that my heart caught up to the meaning of the words of "I forgive you."
It's beautiful because we then enter several chapters that are these experiences and these stories that you tell, these beautiful essays that you tell, these very funny essays that you tell, of that I don't think that you would have been able to experience fully had you not at least entertained the idea of forgiveness. Because I think the resentment towards what had happened, the resentment towards the situation that you were in,
it was keeping me from moving on. I wanted to move on, and I would do anything to get through that. And I think with healing in general, I myself, I mean, I love a good shortcut. Whether that comes from a cocktail or anything to sort of like get me through to the end. And what I realized is that there was no shortcut to this, but I was willing to go through whatever steps I needed to do to get to the other side, and find some relief from what I was, just to get out of that dark place, I think.
Yeah, and I think the title is called Painful Favor, and at the very end of the chapter, I think it's articulated beautifully, as said by your friend Chaz. Look at the good that came out of my mother's pain. That is what this is. This is your painful favor. Damn it. And I just know something incredible will grow out of this experience. You can't see it or feel it yet, but somewhere in this swamp of despair, there is a beautiful opportunity. Do you think that by experiencing that forgiveness, that walking through that forgiveness, it allowed you to find the perspective to see the favor?
I think the favor wasn't just one day saying I'm better, or I think I try to articulate in the book that the favor continues to take shape in my life. And what I realized then was, moving on, when you move through and move on through something that's painful, being open to the opportunity, I had a chapter close, and I wanted to find that window to open, to climb through, to find the light and find an opportunity to grow. And I do. I think that favor is still taking shape in my life. And I certainly know that I wouldn't have been able to be available for my dad the way that he needed me. And I wouldn't have been able to be there for my kids during a really, hard and uncharted waters. And if I had had this job that fulfilled me and brought me so much joy, if I was pouring myself into that at that time, I wouldn't have been able to be there. I wouldn't have been able to have the favor of this time that I had with my dad and really be available for him. So I do believe that, there is always an opportunity for growth and something positive to come through when you experience that kind of pain and loss.
So then the second half of the book really takes shape with sort of, well, we'll read some of it. Chapter 9, right after that, gets us into the heart of the pandemic, the H suite, with our son Ozzy's teacher, Miss Mandy, and Tess embracing homeschool. For the first grade homeschool?
No, it was pre-K.
Pre-K, great. I went from proposed production schedules, cast budgets, and actors' auditions to parceling out cotton balls, construction paper, and popsicle sticks. And in all caps, I hated it. Mostly I stayed off camera. Sometimes I would lie next to Ozzy under the kitchen table, and together we would ignore Miss Mandy.
Yeah, homeschool is tough for me.
Change is hard for me. My whole purpose has yet to reveal itself, but until it does, I am also learning to open myself to the reality and remarkable possibility that my mission has changed. I love that. Hold on. I mean, so much of this is so good. I have notes. You can talk about Miss Mandy if you want.
Miss Mandy doesn't know she got a shout out in the book. But towards the end of the pandemic, I ended up just getting on camera and being like, Miss Mandy, I have a question. And I would even do his gym class with him. And it was a lot of like running, and we would go outside and we'd be on camera and I'd be like, how are we doing jumping jacks.
So you go from homeschool to an essay about shoeless, barefoot babes, and turnaround. This is really more of an opinion piece where Tess shares about women who take their shoes off at weddings and dance freely. Tess is both, I would say, enamored by by their freedom, but also troubled by the fact that they just can't keep their shoes on, and it's unsanitary and it's a little bit too far. And how can we find a happy balance? But there is something so wonderful about the chapter and you sort of searching for this freedom during this time and trying to figure out, again, I think what I love about these essays is trying to find out who you are in this new position that you're in.
Right. It's a exploratory, and I was sort of looking at archetypes and being like, the girl that dances without shoes on at the wedding, she seems like fun. And I talk about sort of like, I bet she grew up in a house where she called her parents by their first name, and I bet she didn't have to go to the dinner table with shoes on, and she just, lived this really sexy life that I always was like, wow, like I want to do that. I want to take a shot at the end of the night and say, I'm taking home that guy. But like, there's something in my nature that just can't let go.
You then go on to the +1 era chapter. Upon checking, this is about a trip that we had taken to Montana. Upon checking in for our white water rafting activity, the guide looked at her clipboard. Mr. Greenfield and Mrs. Sanchez, right this way to the boat. Max had registered me under my name, as we always did. It had never occurred to me to change my name when we got married. I felt strong sense of self and deep connection to my Latin roots. Changing my name to Tess Greenfield was not on the table. And Max totally got that. As we were loading up the boat and putting on our life jackets, the guide leaned in and asked, "Do you travel with the Greenfields often?" As we settled into the boat wearing our helmets and layers of clothes over our bathing suits, Ozzy, our son, reminded Max and me that he did not want to go rafting. It was early June and the river was about 50 degrees. We reassured him that it would be fun, and we headed towards the rapids. As we pushed off, freezing water began sloshing into the boat, at first splashing in Ozzy's legs and then his arms, but when it started hitting him in the face, he finally had reached his limit. He grabbed my hand and leg and folded his body towards me and let out the loudest, shrillest scream of all. "Mommy! Mommy! Mommy!" I responded with the words of warmth and comfort, and when those words failed, I tried to distract him by pointing out various natural wonders around us, but Ozzy wasn't having it. He continued to cry at a level 10 for the 45-minute journey. Finally, as we exited the boat, everyone's nerves were a little frayed, but I couldn't resist. I looked back at our guide and I casually said, "I make the children call me mommy." I'm just pointing. I just love these stories, but I think this was the way you put them together so beautifully illustrates this sort of search for who you were and and the people that we look at and the fantasies we have of who we want to be and parts of people that we yearn to be, which brings us to callbacks for sexy mommies, where Tess tried to give advice to her friend who was going away with her teenage son and didn't know how to communicate. She writes a list of things, rules that she should apply during this trip. Tess suggests, number 1, your answer on the trip is always yes, regardless of what you would normally agree to and how dumb an idea it may be. 2, be impressed and enchanted by everything he says. 3, throw your head back and laugh at his jokes. This is a 13-year-old boy. 4, stay out late or not. Just do you. 5, encourage it. That's not really a rule. That's just do anything. 5, encourage his independence. 6, don't ask too many questions. 7, own sexy indifference. Great. And last, but most important, speak to him like a peer.
Maybe not great advice, but it felt right at the time.
When I think back to the person I was before having children, I was interesting and relevant and daring. Very much unlike how Lily, our daughter, and Ozzy see me now. But that's what we sign up for, isn't it? The thankless but ultimately rewarding role of motherhood. I agree that there is nothing more uninteresting than checking to make sure your child has done their homework or made their bed or cleared their dishes. I do think the mundane day-to-day aspects of parenting steal your personality, your charm, and in my case, sense of humor. The end.
What, do I end on that?
No, that's not the end.
Oh, okay. I was like, it should be a little bit more uplifting.
It was, well, maybe not all my humor. I certainly laugh at my own absurdity at lengths. But I think I think what struck me about it was it's very honest. And that's not the end of the chapter, and that's nor the end of the thought or the place that you're in, but everyone feels that way. Mm-hmm. And what I love about this book and what I love about the structure of the book and how the story that you tell after having this job taken away from you and having lost your identity and trying so hard to recover from it, while also, the one thing that we have not really discussed during this whole time is the issue with your father and that place where you could go to somebody and ask for support, and as that was gone. My question is how do you look at identity now? You're in such a different place. You have a big fancy book that came out. But really, well, you've gone through this whole process.
It's made me aware of really how I see other people. And because I used to, immediately address specifically women, like, what do you do? Or, and my job, it wasn't what I did, it was who I was. I was my career. And when that went away, I was like, well, who am I without this job? And I think the lesson for me has been a sense of balance of, be wary of choosing one thing in your life to define you. And I did that. I mean, I was a casting executive and, a television executive before I was a wife, a mom, a daughter, a sister. And I think that's why the loss was so hard. But what I hope to take away is that I want to have more balance. I want to have I can be a mom and I can be a wife and I can be without having this huge career to define me, and I can have many things can define me, and many things can and many things should define me. And I am not just one thing.
So throughout this process and throughout, I think, a lot of this recovery process, Tess was dealing with the ongoing and progressing diagnosis that her father had gotten right before she had lost her job. Her father had been diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's and aphasia, which takes away your voice. And so it was incredibly difficult, not only to not have that presence in her life, but also, like any child of an aging parent or somebody that's sick, having to love and support and be there for that person. And I'd say 3 years later,
2 years.
2 years later, Pablo, her father, eventually passed away. And Tess was well into the book at this point, writing the book. She was going through some of his things. I discovered several emails explaining to him how I had met this cute guy named Max. I'm not reading it for that purpose. It was like time traveling. I was right back there communicating my life to my dad. It was wild to read some of these letters about Max and the early observations I had to him. Some of these emails included my dad's responses back on the same page. One said, "I just read this email and I love your descriptions. I hope you keep writing. Maybe you should look into taking a writing class. Maybe a second career path awaits." Do you want to answer the identity question again? Can we add something to it that maybe?
No, I think, when I hear that, when I'm thinking about that last chapter, I had such a unique experience of watching my dad lose his words and his ability to communicate while helping my son learn how to read. Mm-hmm. And to be in that sandwich of watching somebody become a toddler and somebody trying to become a little boy, in reverse. It was such a unique sandwich to be in that particular moment, and so painful. And I remember really just like stepping back and observing this surreal period of life of great growth and great decline. And looking back at that now, I was very aware of like what a unique, specific period that was. And, it makes me sad to think about, watching these two people in my life, this little boy who was feeling he wasn't able to go to school and struggling to learn how to read on Zoom, and everyone wearing masks, and him not being able to see people's mouths and all of that. And then my dad, who used to read the New York Times and play the piano, like he became unable to read and unable to read music, and just seeing that happen at the exact same time was sort of what that, that last chapter just sort of there.
I'll end with this. In the acknowledgments, Tess writes, to Maxie, I don't love it when you call me that. Thank you for insisting during a walk in Battery Park that I stop talking and start writing. It was unclear at the time if you were just fatigued by incessant chatter or you actually thought I should write a book. Either way, I took your prompt and I started to type. You never listen to me.
I did.
But why? What was I would like to know. Was there something I did? Was it a tone, or was it like you? And I'm just left to guess.
I don't think I really have an answer for that.
No. This is the second time we've done this. I love doing this so much. Thank you for letting me do this with you.
Thank you.
I guess we'll open up for questions if anybody has them, but I also just wanted to say thank you guys so much for coming. This is so meaningful. Does anybody have a question for Tess?
Oh, yes. Hi.
Hi. I feel like I'm in the White House press room. In that spirit, I'm asking 2 questions.
Sure.
Number one, you know that I was a very similar experience. When you talk about the trail, when you can look around and see who definitely did that, that's obviously horrible. But what about like afterwards, the people you hear from and the people you don't hear from? Where there's this realization, they only were my friend because I was in a position where I could help them, or you were in a powerful position.
Yeah.
And at what point do you go from like, how come that person's never called me, never checked in with me? I remember one person saying to me, when you land somewhere else, let me know.
Mm.
And this is a person I mentored.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, and this is all kind of coming from my perspective,
Sure.
as a parent, I see the whole thing as a gift because you're teaching your kids how to deal with rejection,
Mm-hmm.
which for a kid is the worst thing that ever happens to them, especially in the world of social media.
Right.
They see a party that they weren't invited to.
Mm-hmm.
When I was married, we lived in a hotel for a while. And my daughter actually saw a bar mitzvah going on in the hotel that she was not invited to.
Oh.
And now that my kids are in college, my son is okay. But my daughter has roommates. She didn't get into a sorority twice, 2 years in a row. Her roommates do things and stuff like that. And it really just comes to,
That's really
I see
hard.
it as a gift.
Yeah.
To be able to say to them, I know what you're going through. Because kids have a way of thinking we're super people.
Right.
And you don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I think the first thing I'll say is I talk about in the book that I allowed my children to see me broken and really sad. But I thought because they had only seen me as a boss and a problem solver and somebody that was, their biggest cheerleader and never, didn't have a bad day. I was just going. And when they saw me really sad, and they would ask like, why are you so sad? And I chose to let them see me that way, because I did know at that time that this is a lesson for them to see, what an opportunity to teach them about resilience. And I knew that that lesson of seeing me broken would only be valuable to them if they could see my comeback, or my ability to turn this into, something positive. Because, it's seeing it on one end is one thing, like, oh, she's not super mom. She doesn't have all the answers, but how does she dig herself out of that? And for my daughter specifically at the time, she was going, entering her teens, and for her to know that, it's possible to feel really shitty, and then also to dig yourself out of that hole and know that everybody goes through that. And I'm glad and I'm proud that she got to see both sides. And then the betrayal part, I I think that
You address it beautifully in the book.
I do.
Yeah, and Painful Favor, when you talk about the people who reached out, and even the people who did not reach out.
I did not. What that taught me was that I want to be the person that reaches out to somebody when they have something. And I really thought about all the times in my past that I had done that, and the times that I hadn't. And I say specifically, there is a thing about giving somebody too much space, or when you're like, you know what, they don't want to hear from me. It's like, doesn't really matter. And like, and I remembered those phone calls and those emails and those notes that I got from people. And I would still, and someone called and I want to give you a pep talk. And I was like, great. I was so open to that. And I think it really taught me that going forward, I would rather make the uncomfortable call, even if I didn't have anything specific to say, but just be like, hey, I'm rooting for you. And I know this sucks, but like, you're going to get through this, and you let me know how I can help. And here's an idea for you. And so, yeah, I'd like to think that we all do that. We all make that right decision, even when we don't have the perfect thing to say.
Yeah. How soon after this all started happening did you start editorializing it and be welcome to it being a public document instead of a private pain? Like at what point did it turn into a book?
It did not turn into a book until not that long ago, because I really started writing this in a therapeutic sense of just sort of like, people were like, please write some of this down. I was driving everyone crazy. A lot of people in this room. This side, and maybe this side too. And I really was like, I have to stop talking to other people about this, and I need to just sort of dial in and get some of this down on paper. And when I did, I still put it all together. And then when my dad passed away and got really sick, I really felt like the writing was really helping me a lot process that. And when I found these emails and letters after he passed that he had saved of mine, and I was like connected to that voice of myself from 20 years earlier. And I was like, where is that scrappy person? Where is that person that's just like, I'm going to do this. I'm optimistic. I'm going to get it done. And, I was like, I need some of that. And then I started to think like, maybe this is telling like a full arc here. Like some of this is just all kind of unfolding in front of me. And it's now feeling like a story, a full story. And when I ended up taking it to Simon & Schuster, they were like, we love this, but it's very sad. It's almost too sad. And I was like, but this is real. And this is like kind of what I want to tell. And they were like, but people are not going to want to read this because it's too like, can you go back and infuse some comedy and add some lighter essays? And that's sort of how the Barefoot Girls and Turnaround and some of the other like lighter things that that I talk about in the book. And I was able to go back at that point. My healing was like pretty like 75% there. And I was able to be like, I was ridiculous. And I was able to go back and infuse some comedy into how ridiculous I was being. And so, yeah. Isn't that what they say? You know, time plus tragedy equals comedy or something like that. Yeah, it's tragedy plus
No,
time.
it's okay.
Mike.
Do whatever.
So yeah, anybody else? Oh, yes, Rob.
Casting question.
Yes, sir.
If they were making a movie of your life,
Okay.
who would play Vivian?
Jennifer Aniston. God almighty.
That's right. I agree.
Oh no, I already know I'll be played by Channing Tatum.
Good call.
In front.
You talked about like your job was your identity.
Yes.
So now that you've had a couple years and you have like a new identity you can add on, do you want to go back, or is it kind of now that you're out of it, you're like, oh, I have like the world that I can choose from, and now you have other things in mind?
A really interesting observation is that I want to go back to that job at that time. That job that I had doesn't exist now. It's a different world. And that part of the business has changed. And the pandemic changed it, and the strike changed it. And when I fantasize about this like job that gave me purpose and life and how fulfilling it was, you know, giving people their first opportunity, that's what I miss. And if there was that exact thing that I could go and do again, I would. But I know that it's just the business has changed. It just is not there. But I my first love is casting, and I will always continue to do it in some capacity, whether it's matchmaking or like finding Brittany's new friends or setting my sister up or connecting business people, like whatever that is. I'm a connector, and I will continue to always do that. Maybe on TV and film too, but we'll see.
So like this idea of we've decided to go in a different direction, you've said several times before, and then now having gone through it, do you think later on in your life you have to have that conversation with somebody that you would take a different approach or have some more levity or be more empathetic having that conversation again with somebody new?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, that phrase obviously will haunt me for the rest of my life. And so I would want to find a different way to say it for sure. And definitely it's given me even more empathy.
You were always really good at delivering that message, though.
I hope so.
Yeah, it was how it was delivered to her. Let's be very clear.
We good? Anybody?
I think that's it. Oh wait, hold on, we have one
Oh,
more.
yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that healing is found in community, and so I think it's really wonderful that you were able to tell your story in the form of a book. And I wonder, while you were healing, there were a lot of layoffs in the entertainment industry. Did you try and find a group of people where you had a common experience to help you through that?
That's interesting. And no, I did not. But I am realizing now that after this last week, I'm sort of the poster child for, you know, losing your job, because every headline is like, this person was fired. And, you know, I can embrace that. And I am here for anybody that wants to talk about it. And I've had so many people reach out to me just recently and say, I lost my job. But it's not exclusive to entertainment. I mean, when we were in Washington, D.C., there was, a row of 20-something girls that were like, I got an email last week, or I tried to get into my job and my badge didn't work. And that's how Trump is letting people go, you know, and my heart just like breaks. I was like, yes, that is, you know, and there's 30-year-old women being like, do you have advice for me? And my advice is like, I'm not qualified to give advice on this is what my journey was. And I think, there's no shortcuts. You got to go through it and look for the opportunity and look for the favor in it, really.
We weren't trying to politicize this.